Okay, so picking up with Mr. Rogers' death, like I was saying before I ended the last video, it kind of really knocks things off kilter. Everything is all topsy-turvy. But as kind of off kilter as things get, um, notice who kind of takes over his duties. It's not the men, it's the women. And they're the ones who go to the kitchen because I guess that's the next, I mean, that's a woman's place in society. And we also get this kind of conversation between Armstrong and the other remaining men with his position on how either women, either Emily or Vera, could be capable as any man of committing Roger's murder because Vera, she's athletic, she's strong, she's young, and Emily has this kind of wiry strength that old women like her have. Coupled with that, anyone who is mentally unhinged, as we believe are I mean, remember that idea of insanity is consistently mentioned when mentioning the murderer, has a great deal of strength. So there it is again, this kind of parallel between femininity and insanity, of murder and insanity. And then we get kind of an insight of Vera's and Emily's mental state. Remember, they are foil characters of each other again. And after they find Rogers's body, Vera kind of breaks out into this wild hysteria. She's laughing. She's like, "Where are the bees? Where are the bees?" And really, she is showing signs of mental frailty. This hysteria is kind of slapped out. I mean, she's slapped out of it, quite literally. And then she is in control of herself again. And the question I have for you, are we seeing cracks in her sanity, or is this a normal reaction as everyone seems to think it is out of, it's a shock. The shock has done this to her. And that's the kind of question I have for you all. And finally, she's the one who's made the connection, the solid connection that these people are dying the same way as they die in the poems. Even Vera comments to herself on her lapse of self-control. And in between this kind of snap out of it kind of ideas, she goes back and forth with this kind of interior chaos where she thinks of Hugo, of all people. And she kind of has to remind herself to keep that stiff, that British stiff upper lip. I mean, there's a reason why they're one of their mottos during World War II is keep strong. What is it? Keep strong, hold on. Keep strong, carry on. Anyways, she wants to have that same control and calmness that Emily Brent seems to have on the exterior. That Emily Brent prizes, that she's proud of. And she's really kind of for lack of a better, proud of herself for facing death bravely, unlike, someone like Armstrong who kind of welcomes and embraces it. She doesn't fear death in her own mind because she says that she stands firm in her belief that she has done nothing wrong. But interior, and if we look at her like interior thoughts and her interior brains, she has these dreams and visions of Beatrice. She dreams that her being at the window, and she's afraid to let her in. She keeps her out because letting her in would mean something terrible would happen. And I think that by really kind of opening herself up to the idea that she's responsible for her death, is akin to her opening that kind of window for Beatrice. She doesn't want to accept that responsibility of her death because, A, that means she's guilty. B, that means she's going to die. And it would figuratively be opening up that part of her soul that she doesn't want to face or she can't face. So the question that I have, is she really brave, or is she just is she just Cleopatra floating in denial? You know, I think that she's just as scared as the rest of them. They share another oddly normal moment over breakfast. And in the beginning of chapter 12, they go their separate ways again. And Bloor and Lombard really have this conversation after Roger's death about a case that this Roger's death reminds him of from the States, of a daughter who's killed her parents. And there's that implication again that a woman is more than capable of committing murder. And I think it's worth noting some of Bloor's kind of, in some ways he's a good detective. He makes connections, but are they the right ones? He seems to have this grave suspicion of Emily Brent now, and he also, Philip Lombard is like, hey man, you can tell me it's just us. We're both going to end up dead anyways. Tell me about Landor. Did you do it? And for the first time, he makes this kind of open confession that Landor was indeed innocent. He sent an innocent man to jail who died in penal servitude because he was paid off by this kind of gang. And he was a corrupt police officer. So in some ways he's a good detective, in other ways he's a very bad detective because he fails to do his duty, he fails to serve. And like I said, he makes these connections, but he doesn't always make the right ones. He's focused on the wrong things, like that kind of focus on the revolver that he has over and over and over again. And quite honestly, he lacks the imagination that the killer should have. So and because of that, he may or may not survive, at least from Lombard's perspective. But he's convinced that the murder is Emily Brent because of religious mania. And dun dun dun, as soon as we suspect somebody, another one bites the dust. Emily Brent dies because of a bee. Well, not really because of a bee, a hypodermic needle that belonged to the doctor, but a bee is floating around in the room. And I think it's, we get another kind of description of our murderer as a playful beast. And Emily's death is kind of important because it is kind of symbolic of the death of like this old traditional way of life. The old kind of, think about England and all of the social things that are going on at the time. She really kind of represents that kind of old Victorian view, or that old Edwardian view of the turn of the century. But also, she's kind of our symbol of religious piety, as displaced and as hypocritical as that may seem. Which I think is something interesting in and of itself, that she's steeped in this religion, but she's seeping with hypocrisy. But we get this kind of death of kind of religion, of morality. There's none of that left. I don't think there's ever any of that on the island ever before, but symbolically, the person who represents that is gone. So, and I think that that's important to note, because what prevents people from doing things that they shouldn't? A lot of times, religious convictions. And if none of these religious convictions exist, it just adds to the lawlessness. It adds to the primal human survival preservation kind of atmosphere that we're in. It's one more thing that society has that the island lacks. So there is a strip search of everyone because somebody stole Armstrong's needle, so he says. They can't find the revolver. All of the kind of lethal weapons that Dr. Armstrong has have been locked away. But in short, they can't find this revolver, and there's kind of this ensuing chaos. And I think it is worth mentioning that Christie even tells us that after the death of Emily Brent, the pretense of civility is over. They're all worried about their own self-preservation, right? I mean, that ties even back to the kind of food that they're left to eat. They're left to eat these canned preserves, things that don't go bad. And it's really taking a toll on our guests physically, I mean, mentally, obviously, but also physically. We get these descriptions of our remaining characters as there's this animal imagery, and that animal imagery keeps going and going until the end of our novel. Bloor has the walk of a slow padding animal, a beast at bay. He's like a wild boar. Lombard, his reactions and his senses are heightened. He's become even more panther-like. He's got this kind of wolf-like grin. A snarling smile with long white teeth. He's a predator. Vera is like a bird who is terrified and unable to move. And the judge has this reptilian smile. I mean, he's been called a tortoise. He's got a tortoise-like look from the opening of chapters, but now it's this sort of that reptilian smile. They act. They're beginning to act like animals or like humans do at the core, and that is evident in their appearance and in their mental state. And to go back into they won't leave each other alone, and then we get this stream of consciousness of their abnormal, diseased, feverish brains, and we don't really know who's who. We can kind of assume, but I think the beauty of it is that we don't really know. We have someone thinking that Armstrong is it. He's a lunatic. They won't get me. And there are thoughts about the revolver. We can assume that's Lombard. There's these fears of death and suspicions of Vera. One of them is worried about the passage of time and the day of judgment, a dream that they want to wake up from. And someone else says, I must keep my head. And for all intents and purposes, they won't, they all suspect each other. They won't leave each other alone because that's the only way they can ensure their safety. Then Vera decides that she's going to go to bed. And we get more from Vera and her kind of backstory and a better insight into her mental state when she discovers this seaweed that's hanging from a hook in her bedroom. And it's really kind of this interesting scene when she's alone. She smells the sea, which triggers her memories of the past, of Hugo, first always Hugo, of Cyril, and it causes this moment of panic for her. And the seaweed could kind of be symbolic of this thing that's strangling her. She's being strangled by her memories. But someone put that seaweed there, right? Vera, yet again, it seems as if she is being singled out, targeted even, played with. And I think that there's some irony there because she is this games mistress. But she was singled out in the swan song. She's singled out by whoever is doing this. And these games, the death, the memories, the guilt are really taking its toll on her mental state. It's viewed by the others, like after she has this kind of fit and she's offered brandy and it has to be from an unsealed bottle. It's viewed by the others as an escape from an intended death. But as the three men are running back and forth upstairs, no one notices that there's no war grave. And is this really a missed attempt, or is this a distraction to kind of give us our sixth death, the death of Justice Lawrence Wargrave? And stuck in chancery basically means he's helpless. It's a pun on words about Chancery Court. But he is shot with the missing revolver. He is also, pay attention to what he is dressed as. He is wearing gray wool on his head, akin to the same kind of cap that an English judge would wear. He is cloaked in this red curtained oil slick robe or whatever. He's dressed as a judge. And his death is symbolic in that his position, his job, has been this maintaining of order on the island, this kind of reining in the chaos among the other guests. And he really represents that upholding of the law. Law and order is out the window. Just like religion is out the window, law and order is out the window. With his death, there is no more law and order. There is this kind of freedom to live beyond those civilized restraints. And in order to survive, they'll have to embrace that mindset. In chapter 14, Philip Lombard finds the revolver in his room. And the most interesting thing that I think comes from, not that all of this isn't important, not that all of this isn't interesting, I think the most chillingly revealing thing is what we get from Vera and her memory. And after the judge's death, we get this kind of further insight into her character, into the type of person that she is. And it starts, I really want you guys to pay attention to her thoughts of Hugo versus her thoughts of Cyril. Hugo, they're full of love, longing, regret, sadness. Her views of Cyril, her memories of Cyril are not as kind. She remembers him as this horrid, whiny boy that pesters her. Okay, this is a dead child. This is the one that she should be grieving over, right? Not Hugo. Hugo's still alive. And there, in this scene, we get it. We get this brutal moment of honesty, and not from her. She never admits anything, but we get her remembering the past. She is guilty. She tells Cyril, go out and swim to that rock. And she knows he's too weak to swim that far. She means for him to drown. She has premeditated his death. And then she pretends this, great effort to go out and save him. Vera has killed an innocent child. And for what? She has been this kind of this figure of bravery, of level-headedness, of sanity, of duty, of charm. And all the while, she is a cold-hearted child killer. And I'll admit, I know that I'm going a little bit longer, and I promise I'll wrap this up. But the first time I remember reading this, I was so pro Vera. I loved Vera as a character. I thought she was great. And that Cyril's death was an accident. And then when I found out that Cyril's death it's premeditated. She kills a kid. It really changed my view of her. So I want to know what you guys think of this revelation of Vera's true inner self. Anyways, she has killed this innocent little boy, and compared to all the other victims of all the other people, Cyril is different because Cyril's, besides being a child, he's not really guilty of anything. I mean, Arthur Richmond, he had an affair with somebody's wife. Beatrice Taylor, she aborted her child and committed suicide. Edward Seaton, he was up on charges for something. Landor probably had some. You see my point. I'm not saying that anybody deserves death, but Cyril's only crime, the only thing that he is guilty of, is being born and taking Hugo's intended inheritance. But why kill him? What is the motive? Well, her motive is she can marry Hugo. She gets the man. her self-preservation. This is a moment of self-preservation for her. She sees Cyril as someone in the way of getting what she wants. And if you think about it, Vera is this working class woman. She can't offer Hugo anything. And because of that, Hugo can't marry her. And the only really means of social mobility available to her is marriage, and marriage to someone who is wealthy. And there may be more going on with Christy making some kind of argument about the role of women in society, but I think that's kind of overshadowed by her larger message that women can be monsters too, and in a way that's far more. Women can be far more devious than a man. So the question I have for you guys is this. Is Vera going crazy, or has she always been insane? Has she always been a little unhinged that's only exacerbated by this obsession with Hugo, and now that he's left her, things have really gone off the rails? We get more insight into Bloor and his thoughts, which I kind of talked about in our direct quotation discussion, so I'm not going to go into that here, but we know he's just as guilty, and his brain is playing tricks on him. He's losing his grasp on kind of his own sanity. But the thing that's interesting at the very end of our selection for today is that Armstrong disappears in the middle of the night. We don't know where he is, we don't know where he goes, and the only people left in the house are Vera, Lombard, and Bloor. So I'm going to stop here, and we will finish the novel next week, and we will talk more about more in depth about your literary analysis. But I hope you guys are enjoying it, and I'm so interested to see what you guys have to say about the developments of our novel thus far. We learned so much has happened, and I'm excited to see what you guys have to say.